Chapter 3448, Chapter 522, A Sacred Glory Expert? I've long stopped being one. Chapter 3448, Chapter 522, A Sacred Glory Expert? I've long stopped being one. Chapter 522, A Sacred Glory Expert? I've long stopped being one. The Hades Society must be crazy. Is this the true strength of the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers? Azura's members were filled with astonishment and worry when they saw the three individuals helming the three wyverns. As for executives such as Liu Wuxing, they started to feel as if their previous belief that Azura could defend Abyssal Star City so long as they concentrated their forces was nothing but a joke. Meanwhile, Azura's members weren't the only ones who despaired at the sight of the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe's combined army of Tier 5 experts. The various hegemonic powers executives who had come to Abyssal Star City to investigate Azura's activities similarly felt suffocated at this sight. While it was true that the Azura Mercenary Alliance was an enemy of the various hegemonic powers, none of the various hegemonic powers executives could bring themselves to feel delighted over Azura's predicament. On the contrary, they felt a sense of camaraderie with Azura's members. World-breaking axe, Heratis. Myriad spears, daylight. Unsleeping death, death stride. One step was greatly shaken when he saw the three individuals helming the wyverns. Is this a celebrity battle organized by the Seven Luminaries Alliance? Why are there three sacred glory experts here? It seems the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers plan to eliminate Azura once and for all, Melissa said, sighing. The three ranking lists published by the Seven Luminaries Alliance across the entire Greater Gods domain were known by all. They were also often the focus of discussion for many people. With the exception of the Luminous Glory List, players capable of entering the Sacred Glory List or Divine Glory List were publicly recognized as powerhouses in the Greater Gods domain. Even the fifth-floor experts regarded as core combatants by the various hegemonic powers were nothing but a joke in front of these powerhouses, let alone titled experts like themselves. Meanwhile, Heratis, Daylight, and Deathstride were not only ranked among the Sacred Glory list, but all three of them were also ranked within the top 500. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that just one of them was enough to wipe the floor with any hegemonic power operating in the miniature ancient world. Normally, the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers would never send such precious combatants into a miniature world. After all, these experts could accomplish much greater things in the Greater Gods domain. Yet, now, three of these experts were mobilized just to target the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Such a shocking scene could rarely be seen even in the Greater Gods domain, so it was mind-blowing that it had happened in a miniature world. Before the players in Abyssal Star City could come back to their senses, faint laughter came from above the city. Black Flame. I heard you want to use the Hades Society to set an example. I wonder how you feel now, asked a fair-skinned young girl of the giant race. The girl was one of the three individuals helming the wyverns, and she spoke in a teasing tone. If you hand over Abyssal Star City and beg for mercy now, I might decide to be merciful and let you go. You sure know how to tell a joke, Heratis, said a rigid and short young man who was similarly helming a wyvern. Then, the young man laughed unreservedly and said, Since when has the world-breaking axe spared anyone who has begged for mercy? If I remember correctly, you annihilated the soul of the last guy who begged for mercy. Stride, you didn't have to expose Heratis like that, said a savage-looking man with messy hair. You should give our brother Black Flame some hope. That way, we wouldn't have to waste as much energy taking over Abyssal Star City. You might think of it as troublesome, but not me, the short young man named Death Stride said, sneering. It won't be anything more than a little exercise. What trouble could there be? You are simply bringing shame to your title of Myriad Spears, Daylight. Glaring at Deathstride and Daylight, the giant girl named Heratis said in dissatisfaction, Can you two give this newbie here a little chance? He is a luminous glory expert, after all. Who knows? I might very well decide to be merciful. The three cannon fodders helming the wyverns ran their mouths one after another, none of them taking Shifeng seriously. Even the 8,000-plus Tier 5 experts of Azura were no different than ants in their eyes. However, the trio's contempt did not provoke any ridicule or anger from the players in Abyssal Star City. On the contrary, Everyone shuddered at their words. "It seems they really intend to wipe us out," Hidden Soul solemnly said as she looked at the three trio talking and laughing in midair. If the three individuals talking were insignificant nobodies, their words could be dismissed as a joke. But all three of them were on the sacred glory list. So, their arrogant words sounded more like a predator wanting to have some fun with their prey before killing it. As a former commander of the Flower of Seven Sins, Hidden Soul had seen many individuals behaving as such before. While everyone in the Abyssal Star Plaza was watching on in silence, a woman stepped up from behind Shafong and said, "Are sacred glory experts so noisy nowadays?" These words were not spoken loudly, but in the silent plaza, they sounded like they were amplified countless times. Hence, everyone in and around the plaza heard these words clearly, and this included One Step and Melissa. The woman who spoke had an elegant look, and she carried a silver spear and shield on her back. Although she had reached Tier 5 already, she was only at level 156, which was quite low compared to the various hegemonic powers experts. Apart from those in and around the plaza, the players riding on the three wyverns in the sky also heard the elegant woman's words loudly and clearly. Immediately, the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers Tier 6 combatants couldn't help but shudder, though not because of the woman but because of the aura emanating from Heratis. "It seems you are eager to be the first to die, old hag," Heratis said, her gaze growing colder and colder as she looked at Inkchaline. "Since you're in such a hurry, I'll grant you your wish." After saying so, Heratis reached for the 5-meter-long axe she carried on her back and threw it at Inkchaline. When the axe separated from Heratis's hand, it traveled across the air without making any sound. Yet, the weapon traveled at the speed of lightning, and it easily penetrated Abyssal Star City's defensive magic array and struck Inkchaline. The sight of this unimpressive attack caused everyone in Abyssal Star City to gasp. It was especially so for Azura's members. Abyssal Star City's defensive magic array had stood strong against numerous attacks from hegemonic powers and sea monsters. The defensive magic array could even block attacks that had reached the Tier 6 standard. Yet, it behaved as if it did not exist against Heratis's attack. Boom! Following a deafening explosion coming from the plaza, everyone in the city gasped once more. This was because, contrary to everyone's expectations, Inkchaline had stopped Heratis's frightening axe. More specifically, she had caught the giant weapon with one hand, and she neither moved nor lost any HP in the process. "Are you also a sacred glory expert?" Heratis was greatly shocked when she saw Inkchaline catch her attack without taking any damage. In her opinion, apart from sacred glory experts, no other expert of the same tier could stop her attack without taking damage. A sacred glory expert? After tossing the giant axe aside, Inkchaline reached for the spear on her back. Then, she threw the weapon at Heratis and indifferently said, "I've long stopped being one. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3449, Chapter 523, Tier 6 appears. Chapter 3449, Chapter 523, Tier 6 appears. Chapter 523, Tier 6 appears like a shooting star. A streak of light shot through the sky above Abyssal Star City and disappeared. Following it, a scream echoed throughout the city. She couldn't resist it. Daylight and Death Stride widened their eyes in disbelief when they saw one of Heratis's arms getting obliterated. They could neither believe nor fathom how this had happened. Heratis, the world-breaking axe, was known for her abnormally high strength attribute. When comparing strength, she could rank among the Sacred Glory list's top 100. Her guild had even assigned her the legendary-ranked Titan Battle Axe because of her dispatch to the miniature ancient world this time. In her current state, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Heratis's strength had reached the average standard of level 160, Tier 6 Berserker Gods. Yet, even though Heratis had used her axe to block Inkchaline's attack, her axe still got sent flying, and one of her arms was obliterated. Impossible. Madness and disbelief filled Heratis's eyes at the loss of her arm. Blinded by rage, she waved her remaining hand and recalled the Titan Battle Axe. Then, she slashed down in Inkchaline's direction. Absolute technique, heavenly might. Space warped along with the descent of the Titan Battle Axe, and many of those standing in the way of the legendary weapon found themselves robbed of their ability to move. However, while many had found themselves immobilized by Heratis's heavenly might, Inchcaline remained unaffected. Not only that, but Inchcaline had thrown the spear she recalled with even greater speed, the weapon splitting into more than a dozen copies of itself mid-flight. Absolute technique, compounded shadow. Spear after spear struck the warped space. When the fifth spear struck, space shattered, and the remaining spears continued onward to Heratis. Seeing this, Heratis was forced to cancel her attack and brandish her axe to defend herself. 1 strike. 2 strikes. 3 strikes. Every strike caused Heratis to lose a chunk of her HP. When the 8th spear struck the Titan battle axe, Heratis's HP fell to 0, and her body fell lifelessly from the sky. Suddenly, silence enveloped Abyssal Star City as everyone stared at Inchcaline as if they had just seen a ghost. Heratis, the world-breaking axe and 439th on the Sacred Glory list, had died, just like that. How is this possible? Not even the top 30 Sacred Glory experts can kill Heratis so easily. Who is that woman? As individuals who were similarly ranked within the Sacred Glory list's top 500, Daylight and Deathstride couldn't help but be shocked and frightened by Inchcaline's strength. As for the players standing in the Abyssal Star Plaza, they were dumbfounded by this unexpected turn of events. Liu Wusheng, Zhou Yarlin, and the other executives of Azura, in particular, felt like they were dreaming. Where did you find such an expert, guild leader? Isn't she a little too strong? Blackie exclaimed, his mouth having difficulty staying shut. Logically, an expert on the Sacred Glory list should be able to dominate the entire miniature ancient world single-handedly. Yet, now, a Sacred Glory expert had just been killed in seconds. The clash between Inchcaline and Heratis was so one-sided that Blackie couldn't help but suspect that the world-breaking axe he had just seen getting killed was an imposter. As for One Step and Melissa, they couldn't help but scrutinize Inchcaline. Could this woman be the Azura Mercenary Alliance's true owner? This was the thought that came to the minds of One Step and Melissa. Unlike Blackie, they had met Heratis in the Greater God's domain before, so they knew that the Heratis that had just been killed was the real deal. Meanwhile, in God's domain, the person in control of an organization would typically be the strongest player in the entire organization. Seeing as Black Flame was only a genius on the Luminous Glory list, One Step and Melissa couldn't help but suspect that Inchcaline was the true owner of the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Inchcaline. I saw this name among the Sacred Glory list's top 10 over a decade ago. Could this woman be that Inchcaline? She's a former top 10 Sacred Glory expert. No wonder Heratis is no match for her. Could she be Zero Wing's mysterious backer? Some of the older players present quickly recognized Inchcaline, and upon discovering Inchcaline's identity, they no longer found it surprising that Inchcaline could kill Heratis so effortlessly. It was true that Heratis was amazing for being able to rank among the Sacred Glory list's top 500. However, there was a qualitative difference between someone ranked in the top 500 and someone ranked in the top 30. So, it wasn't all too unbelievable for a former top 10 Sacred Glory expert to kill the current 439th ranked Sacred Glory expert in one exchange. However, of those present, only Shafong, Gentle Snow, Desolate Fury, La Roja, Cross, River Light, and Blaze I knew the only reason Inchcaline could kill Heratis so effortlessly was because she had multiple secret treasures equipped. There were even combat-ranked secret treasures among them. Be it basic attributes or mana protection, Inchcaline was far above Heratis. Hence, it was only natural for Heratis to lose to Inchcaline in a clash of absolute techniques. Of course, had Heratis chosen to fight by evading, even Inchcaline would have needed some time to kill her. The fight wouldn't have ended so quickly and decisively. While everyone was immersed in silence, Shafong collected the item Heratis dropped and turned his gaze toward Daylight and Deathstride. It seems your plan to take over Abyssal Star City isn't going as smoothly as you expected. Will you two beg for mercy now or choose to continue fighting? Shafong nonchalantly asked. An ugly look appeared on Daylight and Deathstride when they heard Shafong returning their previous provocation to them. Black Flame. Don't get cocky just because you have Inchcaline backing you. Not only did Daylight not panic after realizing Chaline's identity, but he even sneered and said, "Do you really think we have no way to deal with her? With just you two? You're still not qualified for that," Shifeng said disdainfully. Whether it was the Hades Society, Primal Empire, or Sacred Tribe, he had never regarded any of them as his actual opponents. This was because upper-ranking hegemonic powers lacked the qualifications to be his opponent. However, a second after Shifeng finished speaking, a powerful voice echoed throughout Abyssal Star City. "Is this old man qualified, then?" Following this question, an indescribable pressure swept through Abyssal Star City, forcing all players below Tier 5 to their knees. Many Tier 5 experts also felt their movements becoming stiff. Suddenly, a lean old man appeared mid-air, his body staying suspended in the air without any support as he overlooked Abyssal Star City. "Divine might. This is real divine might. This is a lie. This must be a lie. Tier 6. He's a Tier 6 Berserker God." Shock and fear filled the eyes of Azura's members as they looked at the old man. They never expected someone from the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers to get promoted to Tier 6 already. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3450 Chapter 524 Fighting a Tier 6 Opponent. Chapter 3450 Chapter 524 Fighting a Tier 6 Opponent. Chapter 524 Fighting a Tier 6 Opponent. Tier 6. This was the highest tier players could achieve in God's domain. It was also the dream of countless players to reach this tier. Even with the countless experts that existed in the greater God's domain, Tier 6 players remained the various powers' core combat power. Tier 6. Is this the Hades Society's true capability? Hidden Soul, Liu Wusheng, and the Azura Mercenary Alliance's other executives wore grim expressions as they quietly looked at the old man hovering above the city. The joy they felt from seeing Chaline killing Heratis disappeared completely when they felt the aura coming from the old man and saw the Hades Society guild emblem the old man wore. In the current miniature ancient world, Tier 6 was a goal that the various powers experts were frantically trying to reach. This was because they knew that the appearance of the first Tier 6 player would instantly change the miniature ancient world's power structure. Although Hidden Soul and the others had long known that a Tier 6 player could appear at any moment given the miniature ancient world's current situation, they never thought the Hades Society would give birth to a Tier 6 player so quickly. Shortly after the appearance of the elderly Berserker God, the various hegemonic powers executives present in Abyssal Star City went into an uproar. Is the Hades Society insane? How dare they send Nightmare Chaser to the miniature ancient world? One Step was in utter disbelief as he looked at the old man in the sky. Unlike the miniature ancient world's native players, One Step knew a lot more about the greater God's domain's various powers. Nightmare Chaser. This was a name that any player who had operated outside the Starlight realm would have heard of at least once. It was also a name regarded by the various powers operating in the Void Sea as taboo for their Tier 5 members. More specifically, the various powers prohibited any of their Tier 5 members from taking action within the Hades Society's Devil Fortress. This was because any Tier 5 player who dared to do so would be permanently removed from God's domain. Meanwhile, the cause of these removals was none other than Nightmare Chaser. Nightmare Chaser was the Tier 6 Berserker God responsible for guarding the Devil Fortress. He was also the biggest contributor to the Devil Fortress's prosperity. In the current situation where only level 160, Tier 5 players were allowed to enter the miniature ancient world, the idea of sending a level 220, Tier 6 Berserker God into the miniature ancient world was simply absurd. It was especially so when the Berserker God in question was Nightmare Chaser. After all, not only would it cost an astronomical expenditure to bring Nightmare Chaser back to Tier 6 within a short time, but it would also leave Devil Fortress without the infamous Nightmare Chaser's protection. Abyssal Star City is a lost cause now, Melissa stated with a sigh. Then, she turned her gaze toward Shifeng, who stood in the Abyssal Star Plaza, and continued, "I thought I would have another chance to fight Black Flame again, but it seems that won't be possible anymore. What a pity." One Step nodded in agreement as he similarly turned to look at Shifeng. With Nightmare Chaser's personality, he absolutely won't rest until every member of Azura is gone. After losing to Shifeng several months ago, One Step would often think of redeeming himself. But after seeing Nightmare Chaser, he did not doubt that be it Zero Wing or the Azura Mercenary Alliance, both would become history after today. However, just when everyone thought Shifeng would panic at the sight of Nightmare Chaser, Shifeng nonchalantly glanced at the lean old man in the sky and said, "I'm afraid you're still lacking." These words were spoken in a flat tone, yet they echoed loudly in the ears of everyone present in Abyssal Star City. Meanwhile, following Shifeng's words, the various hegemonic powers executives couldn't help but look at him with their eyes and mouth wide open. Is he crazy? He still dares to make provocations at a time like this. Is he not afraid Nightmare Chaser will make him disappear from God's domain? Does he think enchantment can still protect him? When the various hegemonic powers executives saw Shifeng's behavior, they couldn't help but think of him as a fool. After all, a Tier 6 Berserker god was present before him, yet he still failed to see the situation for what it was. How brave of you. It seems you have already prepared yourself to face the consequences of provoking a Tier 6 expert. Suddenly, Nightmare Chaser raised his hand and summoned a crimson saber. Then, he slashed downward with the saber, sending forth a frightening energy blade that threatened to cut Shifeng and Abyssal Star City in half. When the energy blade made contact with Abyssal Star City's defensive magic array, it cut through the self-generated defensive magic array like a hot knife through butter. In front of the frightening energy blade, the defensive magic array that could normally withstand bombardment from an army of Tier 5 players behaved as if it did not even exist. Meanwhile, all of the players in Abyssal Star City couldn't help but be dumbfounded by this scene. Is this how powerful Tier 6 players are? Sound Reaver thought. This was the first time she had seen a Tier 6 player in action, and she couldn't help but be greatly shocked. As an advanced city, Abyssal Star City came with a defensive magic array that could withstand continuous bombardment from over 1,000 Tier 5 experts. Without skills and spells specifically designed to break barriers, it would be impossible to break the defensive magic array within a short time. This had already been proven multiple times in the miniature ancient world. Yet, the defensive magic array that had withstood numerous attacks from various hegemonic powers failed to last even one move against Nightmare Chaser. The gap between Tier 5 and Tier 6 players was magnitudes greater than what she initially thought. Meanwhile, different from Sound Reaver, Shifeng remained unfazed in the face of Nightmare Chaser's attack. He didn't even try to evade it, looking like he was simply waiting to receive the Berserker god's judgment. But just when it seemed like the energy blade was about to hit Shifeng, a figure appeared before him, the shield in the person's hand raised to face the energy blade directly. A moment after the shield and energy blade made contact, a deafening explosion reverberated throughout Abyssal Star City. The resulting shockwaves were so powerful that most of the Tier 5 players standing in the plaza were sent flying over 100 yards away. When the dust settled, a large, bottomless fissure could be seen splitting the plaza. Two people could also be seen standing at one end of the fissure, and they were Shifeng and the shield-wielding enchantment. They didn't die. What did she do? The various Tier 5 experts situated around the plaza couldn't help but doubt their eyes. There was no doubt Nightmare Chaser's attack carried devastating power. It simply wasn't an attack Tier 5 players like themselves could hope to withstand. This was evident just by looking at Abyssal Star City's fading defensive magic array. Even the slightest contact with this attack could probably reduce a Tier 5 tank to dust. Yet, not only did enchantment survive blocking Nightmare Chaser's attack, but the HP she lost from doing so was also inconsequential. How is this possible? Is she really just Tier 5? Riding atop the wyverns loitering above the city, Daybreak and Deathstride were visibly shaken as they looked at enchantment. No one knew the might of Nightmare Chaser better than them. Even if Nightmare Chaser was still at Tier 5, the two of them working together would not last more than 3 moves against him. Yet, even though Nightmare Chaser was currently at Tier 6 and wielding the legendary weapon Revenant Blade, enchantment didn't even lose 3% of her HP from blocking Nightmare Chaser's attack. How was this even possible? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3451, Chapter 525, Godlike Lineup. Chapter 3451, Chapter 525, Godlike Lineup. Chapter 525, Godlike Lineup. Incredible. This is simply incredible. It felt like I would have been obliterated if I had just touched that energy blade, yet she managed to deflect it. No wonder guild leader Black Flame is so relaxed. With such capabilities, she can already fight true Tier 6 players. Liu Wuxing and the others were greatly astonished by Chaline's combat capabilities when they saw the fissure that had resulted from Nightmare Chaser's attack getting deflected. At the same time, they couldn't help but put themselves in Chaline's shoes and wonder how they would do against Nightmare Chaser's attack. However, no matter how many simulations they ran in their minds, they could only get one result: instant death. The gap between them and Chaline was simply massive. Whether it was technique or basic attributes, they were vastly inferior to Chaline. Good. We should have a fighting chance now. Hidden Soul thought, hints of expectation and joy coloring her gloomy face when she saw Chaline mostly unscathed. Originally, Hidden Soul was already close to falling into despair. After all, she knew the difference between Tier 5 and Tier 6 players. When she was still active on the main continent, the best she could ever do as a Tier 5 player was threaten Tier 6 players. It was a qualitative difference that could not be overcome with numbers alone. Not to mention, Nightmare Chaser wasn't your average Tier 6 player. If it was with her current combat standard, Hidden Soul was confident she could defeat the Tier 6 players she had previously faced on the main continent. However, she had zero confidence she could triumph against Nightmare Chaser. After all, as a 5th floor expert, Nightmare Chaser could sweep the floor with her even if they were at the same tier, let alone having a 1-tier advantage. In a certain sense, the Tier 6 Nightmare Chaser was even more terrifying of a foe than the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe's 50,000+ Tier 5 experts. But now that Chaline had shown herself capable of fending off Nightmare Chaser's attack, it would take a lot of pressure off of Abyssal Star City if she could keep him pinned. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, Nightmare Chaser didn't seem all too surprised to see Chaline overcome his attack. Not bad. As expected of a vice commander of Scarecrow Fox, Nightmare Chaser praised as he looked at Chaline. With how effortlessly you deflected my attack, I can say with certainty that you'll be put onto the Divine Glory list the day you decide to advance to Tier 6. That great commander of yours will have a wide smile on his face when he learns of how much you have improved. You overpraise me, sir, Chaline calmly responded as she looked at Nightmare Chaser. If not for the miniature world suppressing you, I wouldn't have been able to deflect your attack so easily. As soon as Chaline finished speaking, Hidden Soul and the others couldn't help but gasp. That devastating attack was subjected to the world's suppression. Many native players couldn't help but find Chaline's words unbelievable. It was especially so for the native players who had seen Tier 6 players in action on the main continent before. They had a very hard time believing that Nightmare Chaser's devastating attack was subjected to any form of suppression. Of the players present, only those who had spent time in the Greater God's domain knew that Chaline wasn't lying. Every world in God's domain, be it a main world or a miniature world, had a protection mechanism for native players against foreign players. If players entered a foreign world, they would face a suppression that would increase in strength along with tiers, and the suppression for Tier 6 players was absurdly powerful. This was why most worlds in the Greater God's domain remained under the control of native powers. As Nightmare Chaser wasn't a native player of the miniature ancient world, he would face a 40% suppression to his basic attributes and physique as a foreign Tier 6 player. In other worlds, Nightmare Chaser could only perform at 60% of his peak in the miniature ancient world. Of course, even with his basic attributes and physique suppressed to such a significant extent, he was still far above Tier 5 players in these regards. Meanwhile, after praising Chaline, Nightmare Chaser turned to look at Chiffon, who stood behind Chaline. It seems you weren't behaving arrogantly without reason, young man, Nightmare Chaser said, chuckling as he stroked his long beard. But I wonder, how will you behave if you have to face 2 Tier 6? Upon hearing Nightmare Chaser's words, the players in Abyssal Star City couldn't help but shudder and think that he must be joking. It was already plenty unbelievable for 1 Tier 6 player to appear. 2 Tier 6 players? Was that even possible? Nightmare, you old bastard. Couldn't you keep your mouth shut? Suddenly, a man shrouded in black mist appeared next to Nightmare Chaser. As if the mist-shrouded man had always been there, nobody noticed how he arrived next to Nightmare Chaser. At the same time, following the mist-shrouded man's arrival, a terrifying divine might spread across Abyssal Star City, causing everyone to feel as if a hand was gripping their heart. Tier 6. Another Tier 6. Heavens! What in the world is happening here? The Hades Society sending Nightmare Chaser here is already crazy enough. Now, even the Primal Empire has lost its mind and mobilized Wraith Saint. One Step got goosebumps as he looked at the two figures in the sky. Melissa was also visibly shocked by this sudden turn of events. Whether it was Nightmare Chaser or Wraith Saint, both were famous individuals in the Void Sea. Any one of them appearing on the battlefield could cause a great uproar. Yet, now, both of them had entered the miniature ancient world and were working together to besiege a city. Meanwhile, Myriad Spears Daylight and Unsleeping Death Stride smirked when they saw the reactions of the players in Abyssal Star City. Incheline was indeed amazing for being able to slay Heratis and deflect an attack from Nightmare Chaser. But when faced with both Nightmare Chaser and Wraith Saint, what could she do? What do we have for them to mobilize two Tier 6 experts? Hidden Soul wryly smiled as she looked at the two figures in the sky, unsure of what the Azura Mercenary Alliance could possibly do to get out of this predicament. As for Liu Wuxing and the others, they thoroughly fell into despair. Young lady from Scarecrow Fox. At this time, Nightmare Chaser suddenly looked at Incheline and smiled, saying, "If you turn away and leave now, I can pretend as if you were never here out of respect for your great commander. You have 3 seconds to consider." When Wraith Saint heard Nightmare Chaser's suggestion, he wasn't particularly surprised. Scarecrow Fox was a powerful adventurer team that even the Hades Society would prefer to avoid provoking. Scarecrow Fox's great commander was especially someone to be feared. "Thank you for your goodwill, but please forgive me for refusing it, sir," Incheline said, shaking her head. Then, in an earnest tone, she continued, "At the same time, I would like to advise you that it is not a wise choice to make an enemy out of guild leader Black Flame." "Not a wise choice?" Nightmare Chaser laughed. He felt like he had just heard the funniest joke of the century. However, he did not try to argue with Incheline. Instead, he turned to Wraith Saint and said, "I'll keep this girl pinned while you deal with the other kid. We'll show this little girl what wisdom really means." "Fine. But you owe me a favor," Wraith Saint said out of annoyance. "Sure." Nightmare Chaser nodded. When Nightmare Chaser finished speaking, Wraith Saint disappeared and reappeared twice in quick succession, the distance between him and Shafong shortening significantly with each reappearance. In the meantime, Nightmare Chaser brandished his saber, sending multiple energy blades in Incheline's direction to keep her busy. Many of the various hegemonic powers executives sighed at this scene. This was because they could tell that Shafong was doomed this time. However, when Wraith Saint disappeared from everyone's eyes for the 3rd time, several arrows targeted him from multiple directions, forcing him to reappear. Then, 2 figures appeared directly in front and behind him, the one in front charging him with a shield while the one in the back swung an axe at him. Boom! The 3 sides separated as soon as they collided. Immediately afterward, Wraith Saint could be seen reappearing nearby, a solemn look on his face as he looked at his 3 new opponents. 3 Golden Masters. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3452, Chapter 526, World-Shaking Battle. Chapter 3452, Chapter 526, World-Shaking Battle. Chapter 526, World-Shaking Battle. Who are you people? Which power are you from? What did Black Flame promise you? Looking at the 3 figures hovering before him, Wraith Saint couldn't help but voice his confusion to calm his restless heart. After all, the 3 new arrivals were simply terrifying. Golden Masters were apex existences in the greater God's domain, and not even apex powers would be willing to offend one without good reason. Yet, now, 3 Golden Masters had appeared before him. Normally, this was something that would only happen in higher wars. What was a higher war? That was a battle that only pseudo-apex powers and above could participate in. Meanwhile, these battles had long been regarded as legends in the greater god's domain. If not for the 3 golden masters before him being at tier 5 and equipped with relatively subpar equipment, he would have probably turned around and fled already. At this moment, Wraith Saint wasn't the only one disturbed by this sudden turn of events. Nightmare Chaser had also stopped his clash with Ink Cheline and stared at the 3 figures hovering in front of Wraith Saint in shock, confusion, and terror. While the average player might not understand what it meant to be able to fly in the current miniature ancient world, as a veteran tier 6 expert who had fought in countless battles in the greater god's domain, Nightmare Chaser knew what it meant. Golden Masters. 3 golden masters. What kind of sick joke was this? Which power are we from? Promise. Desolate Fury, Cross, and La Roja couldn't help but be confused when they heard Wraith Saint's questions. Then, Desolate Fury nonchalantly answered, "Stop blindly guessing. All 3 of us are members of the Azura Mercenary Alliance." Members of the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Wraith Saint couldn't help but look at the 3 golden masters as if they were liars. Before deciding to attack Abyssal Star City, the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe had conducted a thorough investigation on Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance. However, based on their findings, apart from the shimmering sword Laura Crader, everybody else couldn't be considered a noteworthy adversary. Yet, now, 3 golden masters had suddenly appeared and declared themselves members of the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Not even a fool would believe their words. When the 2 sides in midair suddenly stopped fighting, both Azura and the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members couldn't help but be stunned and confused. What's going on? When Midsummer and Wu Xiaoxiao saw Wraith Saint and Nightmare Chaser seemingly backing away out of fear, they couldn't help but grow confused. Why do they seem afraid of Commander Fury and the 2 others? Midsummer and Wu Xiaoxiao were no stranger to Desolate Fury, Cross, and La Roja. They had met all 3 in the Ancient River Kingdom's rookie competition. As for the trio's strength, while it was true that they were powerful experts, that was only among experts of the same generation operating in the Ancient River Kingdom and its surrounding countries. But compared to powerhouses such as Wraith Saint and Nightmare Chaser, who were famous throughout the greater god's domain, there was still much to be desired from the trio. Yet, Wraith Saint and Nightmare Chaser were now behaving warily against the trio. This was simply unbelievable. Meanwhile, the members of the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers reacted differently from Midsummer and Wu Xiaoxiao. It was especially true for Daylight and Deathstride. A force of 3 golden masters was no laughing matter. This was more than just a problem of facing 3 powerful experts. Before deciding to fight these 3 individuals, they also needed to determine which powers these individuals represented and whether they could afford to slight these powers. Damn it. Everyone, attack. We'll take down Abyssal Star City first. Nightmare Chaser commanded after seeing that the 3 golden masters refused to reveal their origins. So what if they have 3 golden masters? Do they really think they can stop an army of 50,000? Personally, Nightmare Chaser did not wish to make such a reckless command when they had 3 golden masters as opponents. After all, even if these 3 golden masters were only tier 5 players who did not possess a single legendary item, the mobility they could achieve in the miniature ancient world was still far superior to a foreign tier 6 player like himself. Not to mention, the destructive power the trio previously displayed had undoubtedly reached the tier 6 standard already. The problem was that they couldn't afford to continue this stalemate. The miniature ancient world was a crucial location for the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribes plans in the Void Sea, and who knew what the powers backing the 3 golden masters were planning. So, rather than wait and see how things played out, the better choice to make would be to eliminate the miniature ancient world's strongest native power, the Azura Mercenary Alliance, as quickly as possible. Once Azura was out of the picture, even if the powers backing the 3 golden masters decided to make a move on the miniature ancient world, they would have difficulty doing so. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Daylight and Death Chaser promptly relayed Nightmare Chaser's command to the army they led. Immediately, dozens of Tier 6 combatants and over 50,000 Tier 5 experts swarmed Abyssal Star City. And because Abyssal Star City's defensive magic array was no longer in operation, nothing stopped the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members from invading the city. Meanwhile, to prevent the city's destruction, Azura's members had no choice but to step out of the city to meet the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members in battle. Fortunately, they had the assistance of the city's cannon towers, magic towers, and Tier 4 and Tier 5 NPCs to even the odds to a certain extent. However, this also led to an exceptionally fierce clash between both sides. The battle, involving tens of thousands of Tier 5 existences, shook the land outside Abyssal Star City. On this battlefield, even the 4th-floor experts normally regarded as invincible became insignificant existences, and one mistake could easily lead to their demise. Only the Tier 5 experts with Tier 6 combat power were not afraid of being surrounded and could dominate their surroundings by themselves. As for the other Tier 5 experts, at least 100 of them died every second. Initially, when the various spectating powers saw how the battle was developing, they thought that Abyssal Star City was doomed for destruction. After all, there was a significant difference in numbers between both sides. While both sides might seem evenly matched right now, it remained a fact that Azura had less lasting power than the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Not to mention, Abyssal Star City's defensive magic array was already destroyed. So, it was only a matter of time before Azura's side lost. However, everyone quickly noticed a peculiar situation occurring on the battlefield. A group of 20-plus experts from Zero Wing was cutting across the battlefield like a harvester designed for harvesting players' lives. Not only did every player in this group possess Tier 6 combat power, but they also possessed unbelievably high durability. Even when multiple hostile Tier 6 combatants tried to gang up on one of them, one healer was enough to let the targeted Zero Wing member withstand the combined assault. In contrast, the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers' Tier 6 combatants fared as if they were made of paper. When targeted by several of Zero Wing's Tier 6 combatants, they would get killed in seconds, even with multiple healers healing them. However, what astonished everyone the most was Gentle Snow's performance. She fought as if she were a true Tier 6 berserker god on the battlefield, and nobody could last more than one hit against her greatswords. Even when multiple Tier 6 combatants surrounded her, she could still reap a life with every swing of her dual greatswords. In only several minutes, Gentle Snow had claimed the lives of over 1,000 Tier 5 experts. Her strength was so devastating that even Nightmare Chaser had to abandon his fight with Ink Chalene and focus on eliminating Gentle Snow first. Only, the outcome of the clash between Gentle Snow and Nightmare Chaser frightened everyone once more. It turned out that the two were evenly matched. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3453, Chapter 527, Number 1 Swordsman's Sword. Chapter 3453, Chapter 527, Number 1 Swordsman's Sword. Chapter 527, Number 1 Swordsman's Sword. As the clash between tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts took place outside Abyssal Star City, the various powers spectating from within the city gained a new understanding of the Azura Mercenary Alliance and Zero Wing. It was especially so for Zero Wing. It should be known that Abyssal Star City was currently facing the combined assault of 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers without the assistance of the city's defensive magic array. If any other power in the miniature ancient world faced such a predicament, their city would quickly fall into ruin, and their forces annihilated. Yet, the Azura Mercenary Alliance was evenly matched with the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. No. The Azura Mercenary Alliance wasn't just evenly matched. It was even slowly gaining an advantage under the lead of Zero Wing's 20-plus experts. Incredible. Zero Wing's strength is simply astonishing. Many rumors have speculated that Zero Wing doesn't have any capable experts other than Black Flame, but in reality, Zero Wing is actually a den of monster. 3 Golden Masters. What kind of origin does Zero Wing's guild leader possess to command such experts? Most of the hegemonic powers operating in the miniature ancient world looked down on the miniature world's native powers, so much so that they wouldn't even bother forming partnerships with them. After all, no matter how powerful a native power was, its strength was only limited to the miniature ancient world. Once the miniature ancient world's native powers set foot into the vast greater god's domain, be it the various superpowers or the miniature ancient world's #1 power, all would become insignificant existences. Even Black Flame's achievement of getting into the luminous glory list was only enough to make the various hegemonic powers feel surprised. It still wasn't enough to get them to put any significance on him. After all, a genius was only a genius. But after today, the hegemonic powers operating in the miniature ancient world had to re-evaluate the significance of Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance. A force consisting of 3 Golden Masters and over 20 Tier 5 experts with Tier 6 combat power was one to be wary of in any realm. After all, once these individuals advanced to Tier 6, there was no doubt they could become bona fide powerhouses in the greater God's domain. If all of these individuals reached Tier 6, it might even be enough to elevate Zero Wing and Azura to the status of an upper-ranking hegemonic power. Meanwhile, the opportunity to partner with a future upper-ranking hegemonic power was a huge temptation for any hegemonic power operating in the greater God's domain. This was because an upper-ranking hegemonic power could hold control over resources far beyond the imagination of ordinary hegemonic powers. Meanwhile, to gain access to these resources, one would normally have to join an upper-ranking hegemonic power. The only problem was that in a situation where resources were limited, the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers wouldn't casually absorb ordinary hegemonic powers. But it was a different story for a new and emerging upper-ranking hegemonic power. A new upper-ranking hegemonic power would need many affiliated powers to assist its development. It was especially so when it came to the management of territories and recruitment of geniuses. Without the help of affiliated powers, an upper-ranking hegemonic power would have a much more difficult time competing with other upper-ranking hegemonic powers. "We can't continue like this, Nightmare," Wraith Saint hurriedly said when he saw that the casualties on their side had exceeded 10,000 already. "Even if we can win, we'll lose at least 70% of our Tier 5 experts. If we sustain such heavy losses in this critical juncture, we will have trouble dealing with the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers." While upper-ranking hegemonic powers such as the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe did not consider Tier 5 experts as strategic assets, losing 70% would still be a huge blow to them. This was more than just a matter of losing some levels. Even more important was the loss of weapons and equipment. After all, while Tier 5 experts might not be considered strategic assets, they remained the mainstays of the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Many of these experts owned fragmented legendary items, which were still considered precious items even in the greater God's domain. Even if the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe were upper-ranking hegemonic powers, they would still find it difficult to handle losing tens of thousands of fragmented legendary items all of a sudden. "In that case, we'll take away their head first," Nightmare Chaser said as he looked at Shafong, who was currently operating Abyssal Star City's magic barrier. "You still have your doppelganger skill, right? Help me keep the two from Scarecrow Fox busy while I finish that kid." Most cities in God's domain came with 2 magic arrays. The first was a defensive magic array meant to prevent enemies from invading the city, while the second was a magic barrier meant to buff the city's defenders. If a city's magic barrier had someone actively controlling it, it could grant even greater bonuses to allies. Meanwhile, the presence of these 2 magic arrays was why it was so difficult to besiege cities in God's domain. Currently, it might seem like the Azura Mercenary Alliance was disadvantaged in numbers, but every one of them received at least a 15% boost to their basic attributes from Abyssal Star City's magic barrier. This allowed Azura's members to surpass their force's basic attributes by a large margin. If not for this buff, Gentle Snow and the others would have never been able to overturn the situation to such a great extent. "Okay." Wraith Saint nodded. Immediately, he used his Tier 6 legacy skill 100 Shadows, instantly splitting into 100 copies of himself. Every copy had 100% of his basic attributes, and they could last up to 1 minute. Of course, as players weren't superhumans, Wraith Saint could only focus on controlling 10 of his doppelgangers, ensuring that each of them had the combat standard of a titled expert. As for his other doppelgangers, they would only be at the refinement realm standard. Even so, 100 Shadows still allowed Wraith Saint to become a very tricky opponent to deal with in the Void Sea, and the average Tier 6 Saint could only flee when encountering him. Meanwhile, upon using 100 Shadows, Wraith Saint promptly used his doppelgangers to pin down Ink Chalene and River Light, preventing them from saving Shafong. He also sent some doppelgangers to distract Gentle Snow, stopping her rampage. Kid. Let's see who can save you this time. Using the opportunity Wraith Saint created, Nightmare Chaser quickly appeared before Shafong and summoned hundreds of dead souls from his Revenant Blade. Every one of these dead souls had the ability to devour souls, and 3 to 5 of them were enough to devour a Tier 5 player's immortal soul completely. Combination Absolute Technique, Soul Slaughter. After summoning the dead souls, Nightmare Chaser promptly used them in conjunction with a combination Absolute Technique, the presence he exuded at this moment causing even a Tier 6 player like Wraith Saint to feel a chill crawl down his back. As for everyone else, they felt as if death had just embraced them. Guild Leader. Dodge it. Hidden Soul and the others panicked when they saw the dead souls Nightmare Chaser summoned. Even a real Tier 6 player would have difficulty defending themselves against the simultaneous attack of hundreds of dead souls. Not to mention, those dead souls could not be blocked by players. However, just when it seemed like the dead souls were about to devour Shafong, Shafong nonchalantly glanced at Nightmare Chaser and unsheathed the Winter of Eternal Night and Shadow Incinerator. Subsequently, Shafong split into multiple copies of himself in mid-air, each copy creating a spiraling river of stars around them that distorted the surrounding space. Gold Combat Technique, Flowing Space. Swords Orbit. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3454, Chapter 528, Unrivaled. Chapter 3454, Chapter 528, Unrivaled. Chapter 528, Unrivaled. TL Notes. Dead Souls-Lost Souls. The hundreds of lost souls summoned by Nightmare Chaser emitted piercing screams above Abyssal Star City's magnificent city walls, causing the Tier 5 players within a 1,000-yard radius to fall into a daze. As for those beneath Tier 4, they fainted on the spot and were forcibly logged out of the game. Evidently, everyone caught within range of the piercing screams had suffered a significant mental blow. What kind of footwork is that? How is he moving so quickly? Is Black Flame crazy? He's really trying to block that kind of attack. Isn't it common sense that souls cannot be physically touched? Does he not even know that? Everyone couldn't help but be confused by Shafong's actions when they saw him taking the initiative to meet the lost souls in battle. After all, souls in God's domain did not have a physical form, meaning they couldn't be touched. This, in turn, made it difficult for players to harm souls. Meanwhile, when Nightmare Chaser saw Shafong trying to block his attack, he couldn't help but get the urge to laugh. Soul Slaughter was his trademark move, and he had killed many Tier 6 experts with it. Some of these targets were even Tier 6 saints who were proficient with soul attacks. Yet, all of them had died to this move without exception. The lost souls he summoned might seem like they could only launch soul attacks, but every one of them also carried a saber light. In other words, anyone targeted by his soul slaughter would not only have to face several hundred soul attacks, but they would also have to face several hundred physical attacks simultaneously. So, for a Tier 5, Sword Saint to try to defend against the lost souls was no different than suicide. Boom! 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 Thundering explosions echoed throughout Abyssal Star City, one after another. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the hundreds of lost souls did not phase through Shafong's swords. Instead, the moment they came into the spiraling rivers of stars, they vanished out of existence like flames getting extinguished. As for the saber lights the lost souls carried, they behaved as if they had collided with an impenetrable wall, and they were the main cause of the explosions that echoed throughout the city. After several hundred explosions, all of the lost souls disappeared, and Shafong could be seen standing tall in mid-air. A Golden Master. He's a Golden Master as well. Guild leader Black Flame is a Golden Master. Daylight and the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers' other members subconsciously gasped when they saw Shafong hovering in mid-air. Even Liu Wuxing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance's other members reacted in a similar manner. Previously, they still didn't understand the significance of being able to fly in the current miniature ancient world. Now, though, they knew that only Tier 6 players and players who had mastered a gold combat technique of the footwork variety could accomplish such a feat. Meanwhile, it should be known that Golden Masters were apex existences in the greater God's domain. The fact that the Azura Mercenary Alliance had 3 Golden Masters was already very astonishing. Yet, now, it was revealed that Azura had a 4th Golden Master. Not to mention, unlike the 3 other Golden Masters, Shifeng was a native player of the miniature ancient world. Once he got promoted to Tier 6, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he'd become an invincible existence in the miniature ancient world. At that time, no foreign power would be able to do anything about him. I see. So that's why that little girl spoke so highly of you. When Nightmare Chaser saw Shifeng hovering at the same elevation as he was, he quickly remembered the words Cheline had previously said to him and came to a realization. But, then, a hint of madness appeared on his face as he said, "But so what if you're a Golden Master? It still doesn't change the fact that you're only at Tier 5. Today, I'll teach you the difference in tiers." As soon as Nightmare Chaser finished speaking, the intensity of his aura skyrocketed, and his body rapidly grew in size until he became a 5-meter-tall giant. In this state, his every movement caused the surrounding space to collapse, and the divine might he exuded caused everyone apart from Wraith Saint to have difficulty moving. Tier 6 Legacy Skill, Spirit God Transformation. His fully recovered to his peak state. When Wraith Saint felt Nightmare Chaser's aura, he couldn't help but grow a little envious. Spirit God Transformation was a legacy berserk skill that enhanced Nightmare Chaser's basic attributes by 220%, physique by 100%, 5 senses by 100%, and reaction speed by 100% for 1 minute. With the assistance of this berserk skill, Nightmare Chaser could even out the powerful suppression he faced from the miniature ancient world and exhibit the combat power of a normal Tier 6 player. With the combat power of a normal Tier 6 player and the legendary weapon Revenant Blade supporting Nightmare Chaser, not even a Tier 5 Golden Master could survive against him. Subsequently, Nightmare Chaser could be seen casually swinging the Revenant Blade in Shifeng's direction. Immediately afterward, hundreds of Tier 5 players positioned within 1,000 yards of Nightmare Chaser were sent flying and losing more than 1/3 of their maximum HP. As for Shifeng, the actual target of Nightmare Chaser's attack, he was sent flying over 1,000 yards away, and his HP fell by over 50%. The 2 swords he wielded also trembled violently as he held them up before him. The difference in strength was obvious at a glance. The 2 of them were not on the same level at all. "You're still alive?" Nightmare Chaser was a little surprised to see Shifeng still standing after taking an attack from his normal state. Unable to help himself, he said in a tone of admiration, "I have to say that your defense is really something. However, it's time to end this farce. With the difference in our tiers, you won't survive a second attack from me." "You are right. As a Tier 5 player, I stand no chance against you." After taking a look at the trembling swords in his hands, Shifeng suddenly sheathed the Shadow Incinerator. Then, he looked at Nightmare Chaser and calmly said, "But it'll be a different story if I reach Tier 6. "If you reach Tier 6? Nightmare Chaser smirked at Shifeng's comment. "Do you think it's that easy to reach Tier 6? There were indeed many ways for players to forcibly elevate their tiers in God's domain, but most of these methods could, at most, elevate players to Tier 5 or grant them combat power at the Tier 6 standard. If players wished to forcibly elevate their tiers to Tier 6, they would need to rely on a fragmented divine artifact at the very least. But how rare were fragmented divine artifacts in the greater God's domain? Reaching Tier 6 is indeed difficult, but I can get infinitely close to it," Shifeng said, nodding. Then, he expended a God Crystal to use Ancient Dragon's power to upgrade the Winter of Eternal Night to the legendary rank. Holy Mana's Shadow. Immediately, a vast amount of holy power and mana flowed out of the Winter of Eternal Night and into Shifeng's body. Then, these 2 types of energies began reconstructing Shifeng's body, increasing its size. 3 meters. 5 meters. 9 meters. Shifeng's body kept growing until it reached 20 meters in height. At the same time, holy patterns appeared all over his body, and complex magic arrays that emitted a sacred glow appeared in his eyes. At first glance, It looked as if a deity from ancient times had descended onto the mortal world. Now, let's start the second round. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3455, Chapter 529, Pseudo-Advanced Law Projection. Chapter 3455, Chapter 529, Pseudo-Advanced Law Projection. Chapter 529, Pseudo-Advanced Law Projection. A transformation skill? You have indeed become much stronger, Nightmare Chaser said as he looked at Shifeng's enlarged body. But so what? You still aren't a Tier 6 player. As soon as Nightmare Chaser finished speaking, an illusory world suddenly formed around him, and his divine might started to cause the space within a 10,000-yard radius to tremble. All Tier 5 players caught within Nightmare Chaser's divine might froze as if their bodies were restrained, while most Tier 4 players fell into a daze. Only a very small number of strong-willed Tier 4 players could remain clear-minded. Along with the appearance of the illusory world, Nightmare Chaser's divine might had undoubtedly undergone a qualitative transformation. What a powerful law projection! Celine mentally exclaimed as she looked at Nightmare Chaser. She, too, had her mobility largely affected by Nightmare Chaser's divine might. Was he not fighting seriously at all just now? Apart from a difference in life rating and basic attributes, another major factor that set Tier 5 and Tier 6 players apart was the ability of Tier 6 players to use law projection via their divine bodies. A law projection was like the mana domain of a Tier 4 player. Only, a law projection was formed with a divine body as its core, and it could rewrite the operating laws of a specific area with its own unique laws. So, a law projection was vastly stronger than a mana domain. Even a Tier 5 player capable of using world creation could only mitigate some of the effects of a Tier 6 player's law projection. Of course, not all Tier 6 players' law projection was of the same strength. Weaker law projections could be completely neutralized by a Tier 5 player's world creation, while a strong and complete law projection could make it so that Tier 5 players couldn't even use world creation. Meanwhile, Nightmare Chaser's law projection was clearly very strong. This was because Celine could only mitigate a small portion of its suppressing effects with her world creation, and her combat power was reduced by over 70%. A pseudo-advanced law projection. As expected of Nightmare Chaser, Wraith Saint couldn't help but be in awe when he felt the suppression coming from the formless laws around him. He has probably already mastered 3 basic laws to create such a powerful law projection. If he can perfectly combine all 3, he'll have a true advanced law projection in his hand. As a veteran Tier 6 expert in the Greater Gods domain, Wraith Saint knew much more about law projections than Tier 5 and Tier 6 players of the younger generation. Not only did he know about the strength categories surrounding law projections, but he also had a detailed understanding of how players could develop their law projections. A pseudo-advanced law projection? Shifeng also couldn't help but look at Nightmare Chaser, feeling a little surprised when he felt the frightening pressure coming from his surroundings. When players advanced to Tier 6, the law projections they could form would differ depending on the laws they had learned. Over 90% of newly promoted Tier 6 players wouldn't have even one basic law mastered, so their law projections would be naturally formed by their divine bodies and considered the weakest variety. Such law projections could be completely neutralized by the world creations of Tier 5 players. As for saints, they were individuals who had fully mastered the operating principles of at least one basic law. So, even if a saint was newly promoted to Tier 6, they could create a powerful law projection that could easily suppress Tier 5 players' world creations. As for pseudo-advanced law projections, their formation required complete mastery over 3 basic laws. The saint-ranked experts who could accomplish such a feat were few and far between. Moreover, so long as these players could combine the 3 basic laws they mastered, they could form an advanced law projection. At that time, they could even suppress the formation of newly promoted Tier 6 players' naturally occurring law projections, let alone Tier 5 players' world creations. Advanced law projections were so powerful that a Tier 6 player with an advanced law projection and a legendary weapon could kill a Tier 6 god by themselves. Although Nightmare Chaser's law projection had yet to reach the advanced standard, His achievement of reaching the pseudo-advanced standard was still one that many Tier 6 Saint-ranked experts could only dream of attaining. "It seems you know quite a lot about law projections," Nightmare Chaser commented when he heard Shifeng accurately identify his law projections rank. Then, he proudly continued, "That's right. I mastered my third basic law only a few years ago. You are the first person in this miniature world to have forced me to reveal this card, so you can die with pride." After saying so, Nightmare Chaser disappeared from everyone's vision before reappearing behind Shifeng, the revenant blade in his hand transforming into a streak of light as it targeted the back of Shifeng's neck. Nightmare Chaser's speed was so fast that most of the Tier 5 players present couldn't even react to his attack. Boom! A loud explosion echoed throughout Abyssal Star City, and the resulting shockwaves reduced the city's sturdy walls into rubble. In the direction of the revenant blade's advance, a large fissure had also appeared on the ground several thousand yards away, the fissure causing the island that Abyssal Star City sat on to lose a small corner. Amidst everyone's shock, though, the revenant blade could be seen scraping against a sword, their friction causing sparks to fly in all directions. He blocked it. How is this possible? Everyone's eyes bulged when they saw Shifeng successfully stopping the revenant blade without taking any damage. Wraith Saint, in particular, couldn't help but gawk at this sight. Did I hold back too much? Nightmare Chaser was a little confused when he saw how easily Shifeng had blocked his attack. However, he didn't fuss over it too much as he hadn't been serious with his attack just now. After all, in his opinion, no Tier 5 player should be able to stop his attack when suppressed by his law projection. Immediately, Nightmare Chaser began raining a series of attacks on Shifeng with his revenant blade. Boom! 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 Countless explosions echoed throughout the entire island, the shockwaves of the explosions annihilating the Tier 4 players caught within a few thousand yards of the explosion's epicenter. For a time, it looked like the apocalypse had come for Abyssal Star City. However, despite Nightmare Chaser's rampant attacks, he failed to do a single point of damage to Shifeng. The only thing he managed to accomplish was deforming the surrounding terrain and/or the surviving players down below. What did you do? Nightmare Chaser's emotions quickly went from calm to bewilderment after seeing Shifeng block dozens of his moves without taking any damage. Why aren't you affected by my law projection? If both of them had similar basic attributes, it would be understandable for their clash to yield no results. However, he had a pseudo-advanced law projection empowering him. Even a Tier 6 tank with similar basic attributes would have already fallen after blocking so many of his attacks, let alone a Tier 5 Sword Saint. The only explanation Nightmare Chaser could think of for this situation was that Shifeng was unaffected by his law projection. But it was simply unheard of for a Tier 5 player to be able to ignore the effects of a pseudo-advanced law projection. Isn't it just a pseudo-advanced law projection? Why are you making it sound like it cannot be resisted? Shifeng nonchalantly responded. Then, an illusory world formed around him, causing the surrounding space to collapse and distort. A pseudo-advanced law projection? How is this possible? Nightmare Chaser became dumbfounded as he looked at the collapsed space around Shifeng. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3456, Chapter 530, Legend Reemerges. Chapter 3456, Chapter 530, Legend Reemerges. Chapter 530, Legend reemerges as Shifeng hovered in mid-air. The space court within the illusory world he summoned repeatedly collapsed and mended itself, and this illusory world continuously expanded as time went on. In just 3 seconds, the illusory world had already covered a radius of several thousand yards, and it actively butted heads with Nightmare Chaser's illusory world. He also has a pseudo-advanced law projection? Incredible. He actually reached Tier 6. That's not the point. This is a pseudo-advanced law projection we are talking about. The formation of one requires complete mastery over 3 basic laws. Not only is Black Flame a golden master, but he has also mastered 3 basic laws at such a young age. Is he a monster? Many of the various ordinary hegemonic powers executives and upper-ranking hegemonic powers experts were greatly shocked to see Shifeng's law projection matching Nightmare Chaser's law projection in strength. Although the strength categorization of law projections was a secret to most Tier 5 and Tier 6 players, executives of ordinary hegemonic powers and experts of upper-ranking hegemonic powers could still find out about it so long as they were well connected. Meanwhile, it should be known that law projections were different from gold combat techniques. The use of law projections required players to have sufficient understanding and control over the magical elements, while the use of gold combat techniques required players to have sufficient understanding and control over their bodies. The two couldn't even be put in the same category. Normally, just being able to master one of these two things to a high standard could already put a player at the greater god's domain's apex. As for mastering both, that was something most players didn't even dare to dream of accomplishing. It seems the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers are in trouble, One Step said as he looked at the two godlike existences clashing above Abyssal Star City. Black Flame is just too strong. If this stalemate continues, even if the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers can win, it will be a Pyrrhic victory. By the time the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers are ready to mobilize their experts, the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe will lose their ability to compete for the miniature ancient world. No wonder the Desolate Star Corporation's successor, Maria, insisted on partnering with Zero Wing at all costs, Melissa said, nodding in agreement with One Step. At the same time, she couldn't help but grow a little envious of Maria's insightful decision. Now that Abyssal Star City has Black Flame defending it, so long as the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers aren't crazy, they will try to avoid fighting Black Flame as much as possible. And with Abyssal Star City's status in the miniature ancient world, it won't have trouble making star coins in the future. Star coins were indispensable to any power or corporation operating in the real world. They were especially important in the cultivation of geniuses. After all, God's domain's resources were not enough to offer geniuses comprehensive growth. They would also need to complement these in-game resources with real-world resources such as potions. Meanwhile, these real-world resources cost a lot of star coins. Without sufficient star coins, no matter how powerful a power was in God's domain, its future achievements would be limited. There were even many examples of promising powers with meteoric rises disappearing from God's domain because they lacked the channels to earn star coins. Now that the miniature ancient world had become a rest stop in the Void Sea for multiple realms, any player operating nearby would definitely choose to enter the miniature ancient world and rest in its cities. After all, there were very few places for players to rest in the Void Sea, and fortresses in the Void Sea were always overcrowded. Once the Void Sea's players started entering the miniature ancient world, the guild cities situated near the miniature ancient world's entrance were bound to be the first choice for these players to visit. At that time, even if these guild cities only charged an entrance fee of 10 or 20 star coins, they could still make a killing. They might even be more profitable than the fortresses found in the Void Sea by virtue of guild cities being larger than fortresses. While the players in Abyssal Star City were in shock, Nightmare Chaser suddenly distanced himself from Shifeng. "You are very strong, guild leader Black Flame. All of us have underestimated you," Nightmare Chaser said, offering praise to Shifeng without reservation. "With your strength, you are qualified to occupy a portion of the miniature ancient world. If you are willing to cooperate with us, I can promise you on behalf of the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe that we will not only have a truce but also return Withered Sea City to you. I am sure you are aware that neither of us will benefit from continuing this battle. It will only benefit the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers that will come in the future. The wisest choice to make here would be for us to cooperate." Many players were surprised by Nightmare Chaser's sudden proposal. Both sides had already fought to such an extent, yet Nightmare Chaser was now taking the initiative to offer not only a ceasefire but also a partnership. However, everyone also understood why Nightmare Chaser had made such a decision. Whether it was the previous Zero Wing or the Azura Mercenary Alliance, neither was qualified to occupy a portion of the miniature ancient world. However, all of that changed following Black Flame's appearance. Meanwhile, be it in the real world or in God's domain, there were no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. You were the ones to pick a fight, Yet you are now talking about cooperating? Aren't you people thinking too highly of yourselves? Shifeng coldly said as he looked at Nightmare Chaser. You'd better think it through, Guild Leader Black Flame, Nightmare Chaser calmly said. If you think we are afraid of you, then you are dead wrong. You should be aware that no good would come out of a fight between our two sides. If I want to, I can even eliminate everyone here except you. At that time, neither Zero Wing nor Azura can continue surviving in the miniature ancient world. Nightmare Chaser's words were full of arrogance, but nobody present refuted him. This was because his words were the truth. Apart from Shifeng, nobody else present could survive against Nightmare Chaser. Rather than say that this battle was a fight between several powers, it'd be more accurate to say that it was a fight between two individuals. Is that so? Shifeng suddenly laughed. Let's see you try it, then. Immediately, dozens of Shifeng's doppelgangers appeared around Nightmare Chaser. These were the products of Flowing Space's second step, Phantom Body. Under the effects of Holy Mana's shadow, Shifeng could finally use the Gold Combat Technique's second stage, elevating his mobility to a whole new level. Meanwhile, although Shifeng's law projection was not as large as Nightmare Chaser's, he still managed to suppress Nightmare Chaser's law projection for an instant, weakening the bonuses the Berserker God received. Third sword, Holy Annihilation. Boom. Endless flames enveloped the sky above Abyssal Star City, instantly breaking the stalemate between Shifeng and Nightmare Chaser. Moreover, because Nightmare Chaser failed to defend himself in time, and because Holy Annihilation's attack was omnidirectional, the Berserker God ended up taking a direct hit and lost 6% of his HP. My law projection is being suppressed. Nightmare Chaser was greatly confused when he experienced Shifeng's sudden increase in combat power. Even if it was only an instant, his pseudo-advanced law projection had still been suppressed, resulting in an imbalance in strength between both sides. Die. Shifeng didn't give Nightmare Chaser any time to think as he continued executing Flowing Space and Holy Annihilation, repeatedly plundering the Berserker God's HP. In God's domain, mastering and combining three basic laws wasn't the only way to form an advanced law projection. If players mastered an advanced law, they could similarly form an advanced law projection once they reached Tier 6. In his previous life, Shifeng had mastered more than one advanced law. Although he couldn't form an advanced law projection due to him lacking a Tier 6 divine body, the law projection he formed with the help of Holy Mana's shadow still wasn't something that a pseudo-advanced law projection could completely neutralize. 1 hit. 2 hits. 3 hits. Every attack Shifeng executed took away some of Nightmare Chaser's HP. Although Nightmare Chaser tried desperately to evade Shifeng's attacks in the hopes that he could drag out the fight until Shifeng's Holy Mana's shadow ran out, he was simply no match for Shifeng when it came to mobility. As a result, he could only watch as his HP plummeted. On the 17th attack, Nightmare Chaser's HP fell to 0, marking the death of a Tier 6 Berserker God. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3457, Chapter 531, Sword God's Sword. Chapter 3457, Chapter 531, Sword God's Sword. Chapter 531, Sword God's Sword. In the vast greater God's domain, any Tier 6 player could be considered a powerhouse worthy of managing a stronghold. However, it was a different story for Tier 6 experts capable of ruling over a fortress in the Void Sea. These individuals were apex existences of their respective realms, and the various powers would try to avoid provoking them as much as possible. Because of this, Tier 6 experts who were capable of managing fortresses in the Void Sea would rarely get killed. Several years could go by without even one of these experts dying. Meanwhile, the Hades Society's Nightmare Chaser had been challenged by countless Tier 6 experts over the decades he managed the Hades Society's Devil Fortress. However, not once had he ever been defeated, let alone killed. He was akin to a legend in the Hades Society. Yet, now, this legend of the Hades Society had been killed in a miniature world. When the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members attacking Abyssal Star City saw this, all of them fell silent as they watched Nightmare Chaser's body fall from the sky. For a time, they even forgot to continue fighting. Lord Chaser got killed? This must be a lie. Nightmare Chaser's been undefeated for decades. How can he get killed, just like that? The 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members couldn't accept Nightmare Chaser's death. It was especially so for the Hades Society's members. They could accept Nightmare Chaser's defeat, as there were countless experts in the greater god's domain. Not to mention, situations where the younger generations surpassed the older generations often occurred. However, what they couldn't accept was Nightmare Chaser getting killed by someone of a lower tier. He transcended tiers to kill Nightmare Chaser? Did I just bear witness to the birth of a legend? River Light of Scarecrow Fox was greatly shocked when he saw Nightmare Chaser's corpse hitting the ground. It could already be considered a legendary feat for a Tier 5 player to kill a Tier 6 player, let alone a Tier 6 player of Nightmare Chaser's caliber. What Shifeng just accomplished was already beyond legendary. At this time, even Ink Chalene was at a loss for words. Previously, Ink Chalene had only thought of getting closer to Shifeng because of his ability to summon a Tier 6 war goddess. After all, a Tier 6 war goddess was an opponent that even pseudo-apex powers would not dare to provoke. The assistance of a Tier 6 war goddess could also yield incredible results in the exploration of the underground Crystal Palace. Moreover, apart from having the ability to summon a Tier 6 war goddess, Shifeng also seemed to be more knowledgeable about the underground Crystal Palace than even pseudo-apex powers. Hence, Ink Chalene resolved herself to form a connection with Shifeng. At that time, Scarecrow Fox could purchase useful information from Shifeng and secure some advantages in the competition over the secret land. It can be hard to make great work when it's stolen from. But now, it appeared that Shifeng's potential far exceeded her expectations. Even without relying on the Tier 6 war goddess, Shifeng could easily secure himself a place in the underground Crystal Palace just by relying on himself and the 3 golden masters he commanded. The 4 of them alone might even be able to compete with the various pseudo-apex powers. Guild leader Blackflame is so strong, Reaver. Even that Tier 6 Berserker god is no match for him, the young female knight standing next to Sound Reaver exclaimed. Victory is on our side for sure now. Is this the strength of the former #1 swordsman? Sound Reaver wondered as she stared at Shifeng's figure standing proudly in mid-air. Previously, Sound Reaver had been confident she could catch up to Shifeng. But now, she didn't even know how long it would take her just to get to Nightmare Chaser's standard, let alone catch up to Shifeng. Suddenly, Sound Reaver understood why, despite Shifeng having missed the most important 4 months of development in miniature ancient world, Azura's executives, such as Zhou Yarlin and Lin Yaoyu, would still hold him in such high regard. At the same time, Zero Wings and Azura's members cheered in celebration. After all, not only did Shifeng's victory signify their victory in this battle, but it also meant that Zero Wing would become officially recognized as a powerful guild in the miniature ancient world. As for the Azura Mercenary Alliance, it would become capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers. After this battle, Azura's members would no longer have to fear the various foreign powers and could develop in peace in the miniature ancient world. After all, they had someone capable of slaying Tier 6 experts on their side. Unless the various foreign powers were willing to make big sacrifices, how many Tier 6 experts could they possibly afford to mobilize into the miniature ancient world? Damn it. Everyone, retreat to Withered Sea City immediately, Wraith Saint commanded with gritted teeth when he saw Nightmare Chasers fall. Hearing this, Daylight, Deathstride, and the 6 other surviving Tier 6 combatants of the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers briefly exchanged glances before each taking out a silver crystal half the size of a person. Then, they began pouring their mana into their respective crystals. Immediately, a teleportation ring encompassing a 1,000-yard radius appeared around each of the 8 players, forcibly teleporting all of their allies away. A large group teleportation crystal? They even prepared such a strategic item? One Step couldn't help but be flabbergasted when he saw how the 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers members disappeared from the battlefield. Group teleportation crystals were already worth a ton in the greater god's domain due to their rarity, each being as valuable as a fragmented legendary weapon. Above them were large group teleportation crystals, and not only were they rarer than legendary items, but each of them was as valuable as a legendary item. Normally, a veteran hegemonic power would only have several large group teleportation crystals in storage, and they would never use them unless their continued existence was threatened. Yet, now, the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers had used a combined total of 8 large group teleportation crystals. How wealthy of these people! Inkchaline was also astonished by the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers' extravagance. After all, large group teleportation crystals were consumable items. What the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers just did was no different than burning 8 legendary items. Even a mighty adventurer team like Scarecrow Fox would wince at such a loss. Of course, Inkchaline could understand why the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers made such a costly decision. If the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe were to lose all of their Tier 5 experts in this battle, the losses they would suffer would be far greater than just 8 legendary items. It was one thing to lose tens of thousands of fragmented legendary items. It was a whole other matter to lose their qualifications to compete over the miniature ancient world. That was a loss the three powers could never accept. Escape. When Shifeng saw the army of Tier 5 players disappear, he focused his gaze on the 8 fading teleportation arrays in the sky. Do you think you can escape in front of a great Grandmaster magician? After taking a deep breath, Shifeng raised the Winter of Eternal Night and swung it at the 8 fading teleportation arrays. Radiant Night. Swords orbit. Immediately, hundreds of sword lights as dark as night traveled surged into the teleportation arrays. Then, they merged with the teleportation arrays and vanished without a trace. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3458, Chapter 532, Frightened Withered Sea City. Chapter 3458, Chapter 532, Frightened Withered Sea City. Chapter 532, Frightened Withered Sea City. Sea, Withered Sea City. Amidst the glow of the setting sun, flying mounts could be seen flying across the blue sky above Withered Sea City, and hundreds of ships could be seen coming and going from the city's port at every given moment. Many of the players riding on these flying mounts and ships were foreign players visiting the miniature ancient world to rest, and their arrival brought life and laughter to the extremely dangerous Sea. The Hades Society sure lucked out. Not only were they the first to discover this miniature world, but their fortress in the Void Sea is even located near this place. So long as they're willing to invest some mana stones and 7 luminaries crystals, they can quickly mobilize a large number of Tier 5 players here. The Myriad Forest Empire's Silent Saintess, who was now a level 158, Tier 5 player, said enviously as she looked at the crowded port. The fee to enter Withered Sea City is 30 star coins. There are a minimum of 300,000 players coming here to rest from the Void Sea every day, so that's nearly 10 million star coins of pure profit every day. If I can make that much money every day for 10 days, I can already retire and enjoy life. 100 million star coins? Are you living in a dream? Glorious Mantra, who was now a level 157, Tier 5 player, said with a look of disdain. With our standards, unless we advance to Tier 6, the most we can make within our lifetimes is 20 or 30 million. It's a pity we got eliminated from the rookie competition by Black Flame, Silent Saintess said with a sigh. Otherwise, we would have similarly had a chance to enter the Eternal Realm. If we can get a head start there, we can easily make a couple 100 million. We wouldn't have to explore the dangerous Void Sea in search of ruins and treasures. We also wouldn't have to get exploited by the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Because of her failure to secure a spot in the Galaxy Corporation's invitational competition, she had no choice but advance to Tier 5 and team up with the Red Star Kingdom's Glorious Mantra and the Iron Lion Kingdom's Martial Quadbeast to explore the Void Sea. Stop bringing it up. We can only consider ourselves unlucky for coming across a luminous glory expert, Martial Quadbeast said, sighing. Rather than reopening old wounds, we should focus on recovering our stamina and concentration as soon as possible. More and more experts are migrating to our part of the Void Sea because of this miniature ancient world, so we should hurry up and explore our region. That way, we can explore even farther areas before those other Tier 5 experts arrive. Silent Saintess and Glorious Mantra nodded. Then, The trio made their way to Withered Sea City's central district. While the three of them might be titled experts, their strength only held significance in the various kingdoms and empires. In the Void Sea, where experts from various realms gathered, titled experts were relatively common. Not to mention, the Void Sea was mainly the domain of Tier 6 players. Withered Sea City, Central District. When Silent Saintess, Glorious Mantra, and Martial Quad Beast arrived at the bustling Central District, they were immediately greeted by a shocking spectacle. At this moment, tens of thousands of radiant lights suddenly descended upon the central plaza, the descent of every streak of light bringing with it a frightening aura. Evidently, all of these players who had just teleported into the city were Tier 5 players. Moreover, many of these Tier 5 players were 4th-floor experts and titled experts. They also wore the guild emblems of the Hades Society, Primal Empire, or Sacred Tribe. When these tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts appeared together, the terrifying aura they emanated caused Silent Saintess's group of three to shudder in fear. What's going on? Why did so many Tier 5 experts suddenly appear together? All of these players are from the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe. Could the three powers have banded together? What? Did you just find out about it now? I heard that the three powers had joined forces to attack Abyssal Star City and are planning to thoroughly exterminate the Azura Mercenary Alliance, the alliance created by the Azura Sword Emperor Black Flame. I also heard that Black Flame has recently returned, so it must have been a battle of epic proportions. They went to exterminate Azura? Why are they back, then? When the players resting in the restaurants surrounding the central plaza saw the sudden arrival of the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers experts, they couldn't help but grow curious and start a discussion among themselves. Black Flame. Silent Saintess's group of three also had their interests piqued when they overheard the discussions of the players around them. That person actually comes from this miniature world. Black Flame, the Azura Sword Emperor, had already become a legendary figure in the ancient River Kingdom and its surrounding countries. He had appeared very suddenly in the ancient River Kingdom and proceeded to defeat numerous paragons in the kingdom's rookie competition. But after becoming the rookie competition's champion, he disappeared just as suddenly as he appeared. Then, just when everyone thought Black Flame had been eliminated by some power targeting him, his name suddenly appeared on the Seven Luminaries Alliance's Luminous Glory list, exciting countless players in the ancient River Kingdom and the players who had fought Black Flame in the past. However, Silent Saintess's group of three didn't think they would hear Black Flame's name again after entering the Void Sea, much less hear about him clashing against three upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Withered Sea City, Central Plaza. Thank goodness Black Flame didn't react in time. Wraith Saint breathed a deep sigh of relief when he saw that all of the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe's surviving Tier 5 experts made it back to Withered Sea City alive. For a moment there, he was truly worried that Shifeng would react fast enough and kill the players activating the large group teleportation crystals. If those teleportation crystals failed to activate, their three powers would have had to suffer catastrophic losses in the miniature ancient world. Black Flame is too conceited. He probably thought that we never considered the possibility of failure, Myriad Spears Daylight said, laughing. Now that we managed to conserve over 70% of our Tier 5 players, we just need to wait for more Tier 6 players to appear. Then, we can go back and take care of Zero Wing and Azura, Death Stride, the Unsleeping Death, and the other Tier 6 combatants of the three powers also laughed and nodded. The miniature ancient world's world passage had only opened not long ago, so foreign powers such as the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe had yet to start exerting their strength. Once more of their Tier 5 paragons got promoted to Tier 6, it wouldn't matter how heaven-defying Shifeng was. Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance would still be doomed. After all, their three powers had far more resources to create Tier 6 players than Zero Wing and Azura did. The three upper-ranking hegemonic powers were defeated. Silent Saintess, Glorious Mantra, and Martial Quad Beast were stunned when they overheard Daylight's words. Upper-ranking hegemonic powers were apex existences in the Starlight realm. They were vastly superior to ordinary hegemonic powers, and each of them controlled over a dozen empires and dozens of kingdoms. If three upper-ranking hegemonic powers banded together, Even conglomerates would have to tread carefully around them. Yet, now, they were defeated by the alliance created by Black Flame. However, just as the members of the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers were joyfully deriding Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance, the sky above Withered Sea City suddenly changed. The next moment, hundreds of dark sword lights suddenly descended from the teleportation passage situated within the city's defensive magic array, each one carrying irresistible might. Even Tier 5 players standing thousands of yards away felt an instinctive fear when they felt the power coming from these sword lights. Before anyone could react, the hundreds of sword lights fell onto the crowded central plaza and transformed into a brilliant river of stars that was encompassed by a dark void. Then, the miniature galaxy disappeared, leaving behind a desolate wasteland. What just happened? Where did everyone go? Tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts are gone, just like that. What is up with those sword lights? Those are definitely the attacks of a Tier 6 existence. And how did those attacks come through the teleportation passage? Did a Tier 6 NPC make a move? Apart from fear, the players resting around the central plaza were also filled with confusion. The central plaza had been fine just a moment ago. Yet, not only was it suddenly attacked, but the attack had come through a teleportation passage, directly bypassing Withered Sea City's defensive magic array. Such a situation was simply unheard of. Meanwhile, in a corner of the central plaza, Silent Saintess, Glorious Mantra, and Martial Quad Beast felt shivers crawl down their spines. This was because they were incredibly familiar with the attack that had just annihilated the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers' Tier 5 army. Is the system playing a joke on us? Silent Saintess dazedly muttered as she stared at the fading sword lights. She would never mistake those sword lights. Those were the sword lights of the Azura Sword Emperor, and they were the product of the combat technique that previously killed her in the rookie competition. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3459, Chapter 533, Updated Sacred Glory List. Chapter 3459, Chapter 533, Updated Sacred Glory List. Chapter 533, Updated Sacred Glory List. Boundary C, Abyssal Star City. A day had passed since the defensive siege took place in Abyssal Star City. By now, most of the city's infrastructure had been restored, and many shops, hotels, and restaurants had resumed operating normally. Not only did Abyssal Star City not fall into depression, but it had become even more bustling than before. Originally, Abyssal Star City would only see daily traffic of about 10 million players. Moreover, most of it would consist of native players. Now, though, not only did the city's player traffic increase multiple times, but most of it also consisted of foreign players. Many foreign powers had even decided to make Abyssal Star City their base of operations. Meanwhile, all this was due to the shocking event in Withered Sea City yesterday. Is that where the Azura Sword Emperor lives? A level 160, Tier 5, Sword Saint of the Blood Elf race muttered as she looked at the majestic guild residence in the distance. The Elven Sword Saint was 2 meters tall, and she wore the guild emblem of Azure Fang, a pseudo-apex power in the Greater God's domain. When this Elven Sword Saint walked down the street, many foreign experts would take the initiative to make way for her. Even fifth-floor experts famous in the Void Sea dared not get close to her. Why is Azure Fang's Saintess here? Has Azure Fang lost its mind? I heard Azure Fang's Saintess recently constructed an advanced epic divine body and can get promoted into a Tier 6 sword god anytime. Azure Fang has even prepared to appoint her as its third vice guild leader. Why would such a big shot appear in this place? It is indeed strange. While the miniature ancient world might be a goldmine, it shouldn't hold much appeal to a pseudo-apex power like Azure Fang. You can't say that. After all, the miniature ancient world is a meeting point for multiple realms. There might not be many visitors now, but once news of the miniature ancient world spreads, tons of profits can be gained. With Abyssal Star City's current location and facilities, its revenue will be considerable even for a pseudo-apex power. Not to mention, quite a few powers currently have their eyes on Abyssal Star City. Even if Black Flame is strong, he will probably have trouble dealing with all of them. If Azure Fang steps up now, so long as Black Flame is smart, he will choose to partner with Azure Fang for protection. In exchange, Azure Fang will get some extra income without having to make too big of an investment. The various powers experts started a hushed discussion among themselves when they saw Azure Fang's Saintess making her way to Zero Wing's residence. Initially, the various foreign powers operating in the miniature ancient world were given a huge fright when they learned of the decimation of the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe's Tier 5 army in Withered Sea City. After all, the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers' Tier 5 army was composed of tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts as well as the Tier 6, Wraith Saint. Yet, all of these experts were killed in the middle of Withered Sea City, and nobody knew who was responsible for this slaughter. It should be known that the Hades Society had invested a ton into Withered Sea City so as to solidify its foothold in the miniature ancient world, going as far as to set up a great Grandmaster defensive magic array for the city immediately after capturing it from the Azura Mercenary Alliance. This put the city's defensive capabilities on par with the Void Sea's fortresses. Meanwhile, even 100 Tier 6 experts attacking together would need a long time to break through such a powerful defensive magic array under normal circumstances. Yet, someone had managed to bypass the defensive magic array and annihilate tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts, all within an instant. Never in their dreams would the various powers dare to imagine such a situation happening. However, it was a fact that such an incident had taken place, so how could the various powers not be frightened? But after the various powers probed around, they discovered something even more frightening. The culprit behind this incident was none other than Black Flame, the founder behind the two organizations targeted by the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe. Despite being only a Tier 5, Sword Saint, Black Flame had transcended tiers to slay the Tier 6 Nightmare Chaser. After that, he even utilized the teleportation arrays of the large group teleportation crystals used by the three upper-ranking hegemonic powers to escape to annihilate the three powers' Tier 5 army. Both achievements sounded like they came straight out of a fantasy. As a result of these achievements, Black Flame had thoroughly become a thorn in the eyes of the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers. The various upper-ranking hegemonic powers had even secretly joined forces with the intention of eliminating Black Flame first before competing for the miniature ancient world. Inside a high-class bar in Abyssal Star City, many executives of ordinary hegemonic powers were currently gathered here to exchange information and form alliances. They were doing so to resist the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers and survive in the miniature ancient world. One step, Melissa. Aren't your guilds a little too crazy? Why did you decide to join Azura at this critical juncture? Are you not afraid of those upper-ranking hegemonic powers' retaliation? A level 160, Tier 5 shield warrior said, expressing his confusion when he saw the two people before him wearing the Azura Mercenary Alliance's emblem. It is indeed risky, but as the saying goes, a friend who helps you when you are in need is better than one that congratulates you when you are successful, One Step said before taking a sip of wine. Though, despite how calmly he spoke, the hint of worry in his eyes betrayed his calmness. Divine Hunter's and Morning Light's decision to join the Azura Mercenary Alliance was honestly a huge gamble. After all, once they lost the bet, they would permanently lose access to the miniature ancient world. However, One Step did not regret his decision to push Divine Hunters into this decision as he had personally witnessed Black Flame's growth. He firmly believed that if Divine Hunters did not join the Azura Mercenary Alliance now, they would come to regret it in the future. Risky? Is that so? Melissa suddenly grinned as if she had just heard a funny joke. One Step, our guilds have hit the jackpot this time. What jackpot? One Step looked at Melissa in confusion. In response, Melissa glanced at One Step with a rare hint of fervor in her eyes and said, "A friend of mine who's in the Seven Luminaries Alliance just messaged me that the Sacred Glory list has just been updated. Who do you think got onto the Sacred Glory list this time? It's probably guild leader Black Flame, right?" One Step nonchalantly answered. With his ability to transcend tiers, it's only normal for him to get onto the Sacred Glory list. But even if he does get onto the Sacred Glory list, I doubt the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers will give up on targeting him. You've guessed correctly. Guild leader Black Flame did make it into the Sacred Glory list this time, Melissa said, smiling at One Step's nonchalance. But do you know what new title the Seven Luminaries Alliance has given to him? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3460, Chapter 534, New Title. Chapter 3460, Chapter 534, New Title. Chapter 534, New Title. A new title? One Step couldn't help but look at Melissa's smiling face in confusion, failing to understand why she would ask such a question. What does that have to do with them hitting a jackpot? Dark Banner Melissa was a talented paragon from roughly the same generation as him. Although they belonged to different guilds, they shared numerous interactions in the Starlight Realm, so they understood each other's personalities well. They were both friends and rivals. It was why they could get together to share a drink. But right now, One Step truly couldn't understand why Melissa would think Black Flame getting a new title would deter the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers from targeting Zero Wing and Azura. It might be true that Black Flame was the undisputed #1 player in the current miniature ancient world, but he was still not a true Tier 6 player. He could only rely on a special skill to temporarily elevate himself to Tier 6 status. While such an ability was indeed amazing, a group of Tier 6 players could easily wear him out and kill him. So, how could Black Flame gaining a new title possibly get the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers to give up on a cake as tempting as the miniature ancient world? Do you really think the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers will be scared of a title on the Sacred Glory list? Melissa, the level 160, Tier 5 shield warrior sitting at the same table as One Step and Melissa said, laughing. If that's the case, those upper-ranking hegemonic powers can simply retire from the greater god's domain and hand all of their resources over to the powers with Sacred Glory experts. We can also start measuring the various powers' strength by how many Sacred Glory experts they have. Many of the executives of hegemonic powers present also laughed after hearing Melissa's and the Shield Warrior's words. The 3 primary ranking lists published by the Seven Luminaries Alliance were indeed famous throughout the greater god's domain. However, out of the 3 lists, the various powers only truly cared about and feared one of them. The Divine Glory list. Of the 3 ranking lists, the Luminous Glory list was also known as the Genius ranking list, the Sacred Glory list was known as the Expert ranking list, and the Divine Glory list was known as the Apex ranking list. The meaning behind each list was very obvious. Players on the Sacred Glory list were indeed hard to come by in the greater god's domain, but they could never be considered true powerhouses because they weren't at Tier 6. There was still a significant difference between Sacred Glory experts and players who had reached the apex. Meanwhile, so long as a player did not rank among the greater god's domain's apex, not even ordinary hegemonic powers would truly fear them, let alone upper-ranking hegemonic powers. The average title on the Sacred Glory list is indeed insufficient to scare those upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Melissa did not get angry at the people laughing at her. On the contrary, she nodded in agreement with their opinions. But she quickly changed her tone as she continued, however, Guild Leader Black Flame's title is different. If you don't believe me, check it out yourselves. After saying so, Melissa shared the latest information she received regarding Black Flame's entry into the Sacred Glory list with everyone around her. A moment later, the noisy bar suddenly fell silent as everyone looked at the information Melissa shared in disbelief. Lord of War Goddesses? How is this possible? He can summon 6 war goddesses by himself. Does he have a divine artifact? The information Melissa shared on Black Flame wasn't detailed. It only had a brief introduction of Black Flame's capabilities. If they wanted more details, they would need to purchase the latest edition of the Sacred Glory list sold by the Seven Luminaries Alliance. Even so, the limited information was already enough to leave everyone amazed and shocked. War goddesses were one of the apex combatants of the greater god's domain's human NPCs. They were one of the main factors keeping players in check and deterring the various player powers from causing chaos in the various human kingdoms and empires. Meanwhile, this deterrence was deeply ingrained in the souls of the greater god's domain's various powers. In the distant past, many guilds behaved wantonly after gaining power. One particular guild had started rapidly expanding its territory across the greater god's domain after accumulating sufficient apex combatants. It even tried to conquer kingdoms and empires without going through the normal channels. While those kingdoms and empires had Tier 6 NPCs defending them, there was no way they could win against Tier 6 apex combatants. So, the hegemonic powers managing those kingdoms and empires were annihilated, and the fall of those countries was imminent. But just when everyone thought everything was set in stone, the human NPCs of the targeted kingdoms and empires sought help from the war god's temple. Then, what happened next shocked the entire greater god's domain. Less than a day after those kingdoms and empires asked for help, the powerful guild, which commanded apex combatants and could challenge apex powers, disappeared overnight. Indeed, all of the guild's members, from the guild leader to the normal members, vanished from God's domain overnight. Not many details were known about what had happened, but there was one thing everyone was certain of. The war god's temple had mobilized an NPC legion composed of 20 individuals, and every one of them was a human NPC bearing the title of war goddess. Even though the 20 war goddesses were severely outnumbered, they had annihilated the lawless guild's several thousand Tier 6 experts, including the 6 old monsters wielding apex combat power. All of these Tier 6 players were deprived of their qualifications to enter God's domain. Meanwhile, after that battle, as many as 7 of the mobilized war goddesses had reported back to the war god's temple. From that moment on, the greater god's domain's players realized that simply having apex combat power didn't necessarily mean they would become invincible. They could still be killed, nonetheless. Meanwhile, after that incident, the 7 surviving war goddesses were labeled by players as the original war goddesses. In the long years that followed, although many up-and-coming guilds would still occasionally cause trouble, every one of them was wiped out by the war god's temple's war goddess legion without exception. Because of these examples, it became common knowledge in the greater god's domain that even apex powers should not provoke the war goddess legion. Now that it was revealed that Black Flame could summon 6 war goddesses by himself, even if he could only summon 6 Tier 5 war goddesses, he was still an opponent to be feared. After all, in the miniature ancient world, where foreign Tier 6 players could not exhibit their full strength, Tier 5 war goddesses who had developed their techniques to the extremes could easily reign supreme over a region. Dead Ash Sea, Withered Sea City. After more than a day had passed, Withered Sea City's central plaza had been fully restored. The city looked like it had never been attacked, and the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribes members continued patrolling the city as usual. The number of foreign Tier 5 players visiting the city had even increased by many times. Did you hear? It seems Hades, Primal, and Sacred have already started to contact the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers after suffering the loss they did yesterday. They're planning to take over the seas and thoroughly isolate Abyssal Star City. I did hear about something like that happening. I even saw some of the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers members entering the Hades Society's residence a while ago. Though, I have to say that Black Flame is incredible to be able to force 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers to such an extent. I know, right? These upper-ranking hegemonic powers are no different than kings in the Void Sea. Nobody dares to provoke them without good reason. It's a pity that these powers are going to lock down the sea. Once they do so, even Black Flame will be powerless to do anything about it. Many foreign Tier 5 players resting in Withered Sea City discussed the incident in the city yesterday. They couldn't help but be amazed that a player from a miniature world could corner multiple upper-ranking hegemonic powers to a point where they needed to join forces. Hey, look at the sky. Why is there a war goddess there? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,